One of the other cases that the Supreme Court, we've been talking about the Supreme Court and health care, but one of the other, Obamacare and all that, one of the other cases that the Supreme Court has recently heard and will be ruling on presumably in June is whether a legislature has the power to basically usurp the judiciary branch of government to say to judges, if somebody's 14 years old and they're convicted of first-degree murder, you have to give them life in prison without parole. I think this is frankly wrong, not only because 14-year-olds are, they're not old enough to drive, they're not old enough to drink, they're not old enough to vote. They're kids. Their brains are only half developed. Final brain development happens around 22. But in addition to that, I don't think that the executive branch should be stepping on the toes of the judiciary. There's a constitutional issue here, too. Cully Stimson is with us, a senior fellow with the HF Center, the Heritage Foundation Center for Legal and Judicial Studies, heritage.org is the website. Cully, welcome to the program.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, glad to have you with us.
Sure.
So Justice Ginsburg described these 14-year-olds who have literally life sentences, no possibility of parole, as throwaway persons. This seems wrong to me. The morality of it seems wrong, the legality of it seems wrong, and the constitutionality of it seems wrong.
Yeah, well, I respectfully disagree. I was in the court last week when both these cases, one out of Alabama, one out of Arkansas, were before the court. And as you know, the technical issue before the court is limited to these two particular defendants. And the question is whether the Eighth Amendment's cruel and unusual clause bans life without parole sentences for teen murderers. And, of course, the court has already moved in the direction of finding yes. In previous cases, Roper said you can't put teens to death.
Actually, you could argue that they voted in the direction of saying no.
Well,
as you just pointed out, they've said you can't put teens to death.
Going with you a little bit there, but I think a lot. Brian Stevenson and the Equal Justice Initiative and those representing the teenagers feel confident. I think that they're going to get a favorable ruling. I'm not so confident because in the decision just a few years ago, the Graham decision, where a person it was found that a person who committed a non-homicide who was sentenced to life without parole, this is a guy from Florida, that was unconstitutional, but they distinguished that case from people who committed homicides. And so,
right. But one of these two kids was a 14-year-old. The 16-year-old who was with him was the trigger man.
Right.
And the 16-year-old actually committed the murder. The 16-year-old had a good enough lawyer, apparently, that he plea bargained. And part of his plea bargain was
fast enough lawyer.
Yeah. And his plea bargain was to flip on the 14-year-old. So the 14-year-old ended up with life in prison without parole. And he wasn't even the guy who committed the murder. Yeah. So tell me this is right? Tell me this doesn't violate the Eighth Amendment's protection against, cruel and unusual punishment?
The 14-year-old teenager you're talking about, when they entered the store, said it's go time. We ain't kidding. It was part of this conspiracy to knock off this
So words
store.
Now are worthy of a life in prison without parole.
No, but what 29 state legislatures have said in this context is that if you're convicted of capital murder, first-degree intentional murder, and you're a teenager, and of course you can't get the death penalty, the state can give you a maximum punishment of life without parole, and the state Supreme Courts have all upheld that, and the appellate courts below the Supreme Court have all upheld the constitutionality of that. And so the precedent is on the side of the states being allowed to do that.
But there are some cases, and I thought this was one of them, this 14-year-old, where this wasn't the state can give you. Mm-hmm. It was the state must give you.
Right. You're right.
And that to me seems like legislative overreach into the realm of the judiciary. The Sixth Amendment and the Seventh Amendments promise you the right to make bail and a speedy trial before a jury of your peers, and those seem to me in violation as much as the Eighth Amendment. And frankly, the entire spirit of the Constitution, which places basically boxes around each one of the three branches of government. The president can't make laws. He can only sign them or veto them. The legislative branch can't determine the constitutionality of a law or can't, adjudicate cases. That's the judiciary. The judiciary can't declare war on somebody. Each one has their own responsibilities. How is it that the legislative branch can say to the judiciary branch, we're going to bind your hands behind your back and force you to give this 14-year-old life in prison, even if you as a judge or a jury don't want to do it?
Two points. One is that it's the legislature's job to set punishments for various crimes, including if they decide to allow teenagers to be tried as adults, and not all states authorize this punishment for teen murderers. That's point number one. And secondly, not all states are mandatory LWOP states, and there's discretion built systemically into the system in each of these states along the way, so that you find that the majority of teens who kill and do violent things end up in juvenile court, which I think is where the majority of them belong to begin with, having been a defense attorney and a prosecutor. But some states, as you point out, allow only one sentence if somebody's convicted of capital murder as a teenager, and that is LWOP. And
right. Isn't this life without parole? Right.
Right.
So isn't this sort of a variation on the Rockefeller drug laws that then became the Nixon war on drugs that, kind of went everywhere? And that is the legislature determining, and particularly with things like the bizarre things like, crack cocaine, different penalties than for powder cocaine. Crack cocaine principally used in communities of color, powder cocaine principally used by white guys on Wall Street. Isn't this a case of legislative excess? I mean, it may be that the Constitution, although I don't, I've read the Constitution many times. I've never seen anywhere in there where it says that a legislature can impose a penalty that must be followed by the judiciary.
Well, I mean, legislate. I wouldn't say that in the Constitution, but the legislator's job, among other things, is to pass laws, including
and define the
laws.
Penalties associated with them.
Right,
I understand
right. But look.
But this is not defining the penalties associated with them.
There's a huge difference, Tom. We had this discussion last time I was on your show. You wouldn't remember me because you've had thousands of guests over the years, but the discussion we had last time differentiated between what makes good sense policy-wise and what is constitutional. And
I think this is bad both.
Well, I know you do, and I just respectfully disagree that it's within the province of state legislatures to pass laws and include teen murderers with a maximum possible penalty of LWOP, or not. And you can go to your legislature and try to change that. Well, in fact, several states have. Texas, for example. One would think Texas is a hang 'em high state in this area. Actually, they've cabined teen murderers who are convicted of capital offenses to just 16 and 17-year-olds. Those below must go to juvenile court and must get lower sentences. So various states have rolled back these provisions. California's been trying for a few years. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, et cetera. So
I'm not, I understand Cully. We're talking Cully Stimson, heritage.org, the Heritage Foundation. I understand the problem of, like with gang violence, and the gang says, okay, who's the 14-year-old here,
right,
or the 13-year-old? Okay, you're the trigger man,
yep,
because you're the one who can't go to jail.
Big problem.
Yeah, it is a big problem. I'm just, and I'm not opposed to doing something about that. I'm just saying that...
Well, especially the person who orders the teen to do it.
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that the place where something needs to be done about that, once the ring fence is defined, right? I mean, once the offense is defined in that statute, and,
yep,
and I would argue that all of them have been for a long, long time, it should be with the judge and the jury, and they should be able to decide a case on its merits, looking at the person in front of them. And once a legislature says, if this law is broken, this penalty must be imposed, you've stripped the judiciary of their discretion.
And that seems to be where Kennedy was going in his questions. Shouldn't judges or something factor in the teen age instead of this automatic mandatory?
Right,
like
or other
rule?
mitigating circumstances. That's one of many. Yeah. So we'll see how this breaks out. Cully Stimson, heritage.org, the Heritage Foundation. Cully, thank you for dropping by.
Thanks a lot.
Good talking with you.
Yep.